Okay, hello friends. So this is your video report for the full moon in Leo, which is coming in tomorrow morning. But we're definitely already in the vibes of this full moon. The moon moved into the sign of Leo yesterday, so on Monday. So we've been building up to this full moon energy, and we also had a Kazemi happen on the weekend that's sort of drawing into the chart of this full moon. So we've been kind of building into this full moon energy already for the last several days. So all of that being said, I'm just going to dive into sharing my screen and sharing the chart. Okay. So here is the chart for the full moon in Leo. So as we can see, we have the moon at 24 degrees Leo. We have the sun opposite at 24 degrees Aquarius. Now, before I go into kind of the chart of this full moon and all the aspects, I want to speak a little bit about the archetype of Leo and the Leo Aquarius axis, because that's really what we're working with this particular full moon. The chart of this full moon is a little bit chaotic and a little bit challenging, I will say, but we'll go into that momentarily. So first off, understanding the archetypes of Leo and Aquarius. So Leo and Aquarius, this is the axis where we understand kind of this, this is the axis where we understand what makes us most unique and what makes us individuals. And then also, this is the axis where we understand how to shine that unique light into the world. And so this is kind of the energy that we're playing with when we're playing with the Aquarius Leo axis. In Aquarius, we're learning about our unique qualities and kind of how we want to be of service to the collective, to community. With Leo, it's all about self-expression and being and shining that authentic light into the world. So when these two archetypes, again, always with polarity archetypes, but when these two archetypes are working in harmony, we can have this really beautiful balance of like, okay, I understand who I am as an individual and what makes me unique, and then how I can share and shine that unique essence into the world. And then flipping back into Aquarius, how I can be of service through shining that essence into the world. So this full moon chart is very much about that. It's very much about kind of this, there may be this kind of aha, awakening, clarity sort of moment that has happened over the last few days, perhaps over the weekend or even Monday or today, where we are able to see something about ourselves in a new way, in a new light. And that awareness is helping us to be able to shine that authentic essence into the world. And what's really funny is like, as I'm speaking this, I'm actually realizing what it is for me. Like over the past few days, I've been like, what is my own realization around this? And as I'm like reading the chart, I'm like, oh yeah, I can very clearly see what it was. So this is what I love about kind of talking through astrology, is sometimes when we're listening or talking it through, we can have these sort of moments of clarity of understanding how this sort of collective energy that we're all experiencing, how it plays out for each of us individually. And that's really what astrology is about. It's not about like understanding the stars in this abstract way. It's really about understanding how this archetypal energy that I'm describing is playing out for you as an individual. So the reason why I say that there might be some kind of like a clarity or an aha or like a light bulb moment or something clicks for you, a new perspective, a new way of seeing things, a new way of thinking about things, especially around understanding your own unique talents and your own unique sort of essence, and then how that plays into you shining that essence into the world. The reason I'm saying all of that is because in this chart, we have Mercury conjunct the sun. So here's our planet Mercury, here's the sun, and over the weekend, this aspect was exact, Saturday and Sunday. And so this is a Kazemi. When we have a Kazemi, it means that we have a planet conjunct the sun, and this is a moment of clarity, illusion, illumination around our Kazemi planet. So with the planet being Mercury, we have some kind of clarity, illumination, and sort of insight, a new perspective in terms of our mind, our intellect, the way we think, the way that we speak, our communication. So it could be something that someone said to us that makes us see ourselves in a new way. It could be a conversation that brought clarity, that brought illumination. But there's some kind of moment, and it could be many, many micro moments that helped us bring clarity and illumination and sort of like a new perspective to a situation. And that energy is very much playing into our full moon, because here we have Mercury. Mercury is still very, very close to the sun in this chart. So we're very much feeding off of this cazimi energy in this full moon chart. And the sun is sort of illuminating this mercurial, like this sort of intellectual insight that we've had or that we're having. And that's bringing some kind of impact to our full moon in Leo, which is about taking that insight, taking what we've learned, and really shining that out into the world. Now, there is a bit of a conflict in this chart, or a bit of a challenge aspect, which is our square from Uranus. So here we have Uranus, 23 degrees Taurus. We've got the moon at 24 degrees of Leo. So that's almost an exact square. And when we have Uranus squaring the moon, this means we also have Uranus squaring the sun in Aquarius and our Mercury cazimi. So this Uranus square, it brings some sort of like an unexpected plot twist sort of energy to this illumination, to this insight that we're having around, this Mercury cazimi. So it could be some information that comes very out of the left field. It could be something very unexpected. It could be just a conversation that brings a new perspective that isn't necessarily comfortable. And in terms of understanding what that could be about for you, I do want to mention that this could tie back. This was an insight I had regarding my own chart, was that this could tie back. So Uranus recently stationed direct, meaning that Uranus has been moving through these kind of degrees of Taurus for quite some time. And if you'll recall back to 2023, if you've been following me, if you've been following the chart, in 2024, last year, we had one of the most major transits of the year was a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. That Jupiter-Uranus conjunction happened at 21 degrees of Taurus. Uranus is currently at 23 degrees of Taurus. So we're still playing within those same kind of degrees of Taurus, with Uranus being there. And that moment happened in April of 2024, April of last year. So it's almost a year ago. But that moment, likely, if you've been following astrology, if you've been following the chart, you know what that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction was about for you. There was some kind of a wake-up call, some kind of a huge insight, transformative change in perspective that happened for you around that conjunction. And for me, at least, when I was really looking into this chart, I realized that the little sort of moments of insight, the smaller moments of clarity brought about by this cazimi in square to Uranus were sort of like ripples of that same bigger aha, that same bigger awakening, that same bigger catalyst of change that happened in last April. So looking back and seeing last April, what was happening in your chart, what was happening in your life, what kind of cataclysmic change was happening, what kind of cataclysmic sort of change in perspective, because Uranus is the great awakener. It awakens us to truth, and it does that through sort of this shock and awe energy. So it's not always positive, or it doesn't always feel positive. Again, with these outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, it can feel very disruptive from the perspective of the personality, from the perspective of the ego, but ultimately it's here for our highest good. And so looking back into what that kind of big awakening or big perspective shift was for you back last April, and seeing how perhaps there's a chance that this moment of this cazimi is sort of playing off of that big awakening. It's probably most likely not as big of a like revelation, but it could be sort of like this little ripple effect where you're seeing sort of a continuation of that theme unfolding in smaller, less significant areas of your life, perhaps. Now, depending on your chart, if you have major planets at, around those late degrees of the fixed signs. So if you have any major planets around like 20 to 30 degrees of any of the fixed signs, so Aquarius, Leo, Scorpio, and Taurus, this square is going to be impacting you a lot more strongly, and this full moon is going to be impacting you a lot more strongly because this full moon will be either squaring or conjunct or opposing your natal planets. So looking into your chart and seeing that, also seeing what houses are occupied by these signs, right? So what house do you have Leo in? What house do you have Aquarius in? That's also going to help you to illuminate, excuse me, what this shift is for you. And what I would say around just how to work with this full moon in general, it's not a full moon where I'd necessarily be like planting any major seeds. It's a bit of a like unpredictable and stable energy, but I think we are going to feel quite a bit of relief on the other side of this full moon. It's also one where, some tension that's maybe been brewing beneath the surface can be coming up for a lot of people. So if there's some area of your life where you've been experiencing sort of a discord or a lack of harmony or this some kind of an imbalance between community and self, between service and self-worth, like those are kind of the themes of Aquarius and Leo, that might be coming up to the surface and there might be tension around that. So we just want to be mindful of that with this full moon. It's not necessarily like one where I would invite you to like really it's one where we want to pick our battles, right? So we want to be mindful of like any conflict that we're stirring up. We want to be mindful of kind of taking the high road in any conflict. And we want to be mindful of really like using this full moon to understand what that potential, if there is some kind of a conflict in your life that's being stirred up by this full moon, like what are the lessons that you can learn from it? What are the perspectives, the mental narratives that you're holding around that conflict? And maybe there's a shift with Uranus in the square that needs to happen around those stories, around those narratives. And maybe there's a conversation that needs to be had, but maybe it's more of like an internal process for you to have around the mental side of it. And then just continuing to show up and shine through your heart. This is Leo. Like Leo's all about shining your authentic light through the heart. There is sort of like a potential for drama in this chart, which is why I say pick your battles. Like Leo can be dramatic as fuck, right? We know this about Leo. So this Leo full moon with in square to Uranus, like there can be a little bit of a drama fest here. So we just want to be mindful of like that temptation towards drama, and then how we can kind of just pull that back in a little bit and really reassess our own stories and narratives and our own energy exchange and like what we're giving energy to and who we're giving energy to. And like it could be a sort of like a fall from grace energy. Like it could be like a something or someone that we've been pedestalizing that needs to like sort of fall it. We need to reassess, we need to come back into our own worthiness. Again, these are all just different possibilities of how this could be playing out for you. So I kind of want to give some different perspectives, different options, and looking at your own chart, looking at what this is hitting in your own natal planets, you're going to understand, and with your own houses, you're going to understand more of what this is kind of stirring up for you personally. So that's pretty much the full moon chart. What I do want to go into as well is just some upcoming transits, because we've got a lot coming up, and there's also a lot of sort of peripheral stuff going on in the chart at the moment. So what we have over here, I want to talk about. So we're moving into March, and I mean it's still not even halfway through February, but we're starting to kind of gear up for March, which is going to be a really kind of wild month astrologically. So I kind of want to give you guys some prep, some warning, and kind of help you to understand what's coming astrologically. So as we know, we are still in Mars retrograde. Mars is preparing to station direct. So Mars has now reached 17 degrees of Cancer. Mars will station direct at 17 degrees of Cancer. So Mars is really no longer moving backward. He's kind of in his stationary degree. And we're in this preparatory stage for Mars to move forward, to move direct in Cancer. So again, I know we've spoken about this a lot already, but just a little bit of a refresher on Mars retrograde. Mars rules our masculine energy. Mars rules the way in which we pursue our desires through action in the 3D world. And with Mars being retrograde through Cancer, we've been really asking ourselves how we take action towards the things that we want, and making sure that the way that we pursue our desires is also in balance with our own internal emotional well-being. Mars in Cancer is very much about emotional safety. And so those themes could be coming up for a lot of people around ways in which we use our sort of masculine energy, our pursuit energy, our drive, our motivation in order to create a sense of emotional safety, and really just re-exploring and reinvestigating the ways in which we do that. And so with Mars moving direct, this will happen February 23rd. We are sort of preparing, we're gearing up for this forward momentum, but we are also preparing for more retrogrades. So March is going to be a big month of retrogrades. April, the energy is going to start to move forward, but we're closing up this Mars retrograde. We're getting some clarity around our own Mars impulse within ourselves and within our chart. And also we're getting clarity around, anything that you've got going on within those degrees of Cancer. And we're setting up for a Venus retrograde. So Venus goes retrograde once every year and a half. So we haven't had a Venus retrograde since July 2023, and we're preparing for her retrograde journey. She's already in pre-shadow. So while Venus is in pre-shadow, this is a very, very important moment in the retrograde journey. We're already getting hints and themes about what this retrograde will be about. And she entered her pre-shadow on January 27th. You're going to want to pay attention to what was happening, what was showing up in your life on that day, specifically around romantic relationships, because that's what Venus rules. Venus rules relationships, she rules beauty, and she rules finance. So understanding that when Venus goes retrograde, it is an opportunity for us to repattern our collective and our individual narratives about romantic relationships. We have an opportunity to really clear karma and to really lay a new blueprint and a new sort of paradigm around what romantic relationships mean to us when Venus goes into retrograde. And the reason why I say it like this is because we have just moved out of the nodal axis of Aries and Libra. The Aries Libra axis of the nodes was all about clearing relationship karma. So many people went through massive relationship karma stuff with the nodes in Aries and Libra. Libra South Node was all about clearing codependency, programming, all of the matrix conditioning we have around romantic relationships, codependency, people pleasing, self-abandonment, self-sacrifice. We had to clear a lot of that. A lot of people cleared toxic relationship patterns that were kind of like long-standing in their lives. A lot of people cleared a lot of relationship karma. A lot of people exited toxic relationships during that time. And it's very interesting to me that after, just as the nodes exited that karmic clearing sort of year and a half long portal of Aries Libra, we had Mars, which was the ruler of the North Node, the ruler of Aries, go into retrograde. So we're repatterning our masculine energy. We're repatterning the way in which we pursue our desires. And Mars also rules sexual energy. So there's a lot around relationships there. And then now, as Mars is going direct, we're going to have Venus go into retrograde right after. And when Venus goes into retrograde, we're offered this opportunity to shift into a new paradigm around romantic relationships. The last time Venus was in retrograde was at the beginning of the Aries Libra nodes. So it's not coincidental. When the nodes went into Aries Libra, Venus went retrograde. That was her last retrograde. So we have grown so much in relationships since July of 2023. We have grown so much individually and collectively. And now we have this opportunity with this Venus retrograde to pattern in and really create a new vision, a new perspective on what's possible within romantic partnerships and what's possible within relationships. And we're really able to tap into a higher timeline around what all of that means. And the reason why I say higher timeline is because when Venus entered her pre-shadow, she was conjunct the North Node and Neptune in Pisces. So as we can see here, Neptune and the North Node are still hanging out in Pisces. They will be for all of February. This is a very mystical time. This is, the North Node represents the highest expression of our destiny, what we're moving towards. The North Node in Pisces is all about advancements in our spiritual gifts. It's all about trust. It's all about surrender. It's all about our connection to the divine and trusting in a divine plan. And with Neptune there, the exalted Neptune in Pisces and the ruler of Pisces is at the North Node. It's creating this sort of like portal into our destiny if we are able to trust and surrender and relinquish control, which is the shadow of the South Node in Virgo, which we've been speaking about. So when Neptune entered pre-shadow, she was conjunct North Node and Neptune in Pisces. So what I feel with this is like, we are going to be asked to revisit any sort of toxic or unhealthy or what's the word I want to use? Like unhelpful illusions that we hold around romantic partnership. And we're also actually able to tap in, like by the time this retrograde ends, which will be on April 12th, we're going to be able to tap into a new timeline when it comes to romantic love and when it comes to relationships in general. That is like a dream come true. And we are able to really plant the seeds for a new paradigm of relating on the planet. And we've got to clear any places where we're in unhealthy fantasy around that. So with Venus being, entering her pre-shadow conjunct Neptune in the North Node, this can be absolute like fantasy love, but it can also be seeing where there's any illusions or any sort of harmful fantasy that we need to sort of straighten ourselves up around. So we're already exploring what this Venus retrograde is going to mean for each of us individually. We want to be looking at what's been coming up around relationships since January 27th to understand more about what this Venus retrograde is going to invite us to learn. And again, retrogrades in general, these are moments of reflection, recalibration, reimagination, and really seeing things from a new perspective. So during her whole retrograde journey, we're going to have many opportunities to see something from a new perspective and to learn a new way of looking at relating. We're just now collecting we're collecting clues. That's what the pre-shadow is for. The pre-shadow is collecting clues. The retrograde is for learning the lesson, and the post-shadow is for integrating the lesson. So we're in pre-shadow now. We will be in pre-shadow of Venus retrograde until March 1st. March 1st, she stations retrograde at 10 degrees of Aries. So you're going to want to look at what you've got going on between 24 degrees of Pisces and 10 degrees of Aries. That will be her retrograde degrees, what you've got going on in that part of your chart, as well as what houses are occupied by Aries and Pisces in your chart. This is even more significant because while Venus is in retrograde, Mercury will also go retrograde in the exact same degrees. So Mercury will retrograde between, I believe, 27 degrees of Pisces and 9 degrees of Aries, almost the exact same part of the chart. And this will happen from March 15th until April 6th. So it's a shorter window, right? Mercury retrograde is going to be 3 weeks. Venus will be 6 weeks, but that Mercury retrograde is going to happen right in the middle of the Venus retrograde, and it's going to be happening through those same degrees of the chart. So this part of the chart is getting a lot of action during March and early April. And the reason I'm sharing all of this now is because we're really right now being invited to surrender into the North Node in Pisces with Neptune. We're being really invited to surrender into our intuitive gifts, into our psychic abilities, into our connection with the divine, into our connection with a higher power. And we don't know where all of it's going right now. We're in retrograde energy, like we're in Venus pre-shadow, we're in Mars retrograde still. Mars will go direct less than a week later. Venus will go retrograde. We're going to be in retrogrades until really mid-April. Things will start to become clear in April. So we don't really know where all of it's going right now. We're really in this trust, surrender, letting go of control energy up until really mid-April. And that's so much of what's happening right now in the sky, even though it's like not necessarily directly related to this particular full moon. It's very important for us to understand this in terms of like the larger cosmic perspective. So I wanted to make sure that I share all of that with you. And the other thing I want to share is that when Mercury enters pre-shadow, Mercury is also going to enter pre-shadow conjunct Neptune in the North Node. So there's this theme with these retrogrades of like some kind of illusion, some kind of fantasy, some kind of, but it's like, it's not necessarily in a bad way because it's at the North Node. It's like, we're tapping into a higher timeline. We're tapping into a higher perspective. We're tapping into some kind of like an illusion or fantasy of what could be possible. And then we're going to go back and we're going to sort of peel away anything I think that's blocking us or that's not allowing us to connect to that higher timeline. And then by the time both of these planets go direct, they're going to go direct. They're going to go direct conjunct Saturn. So there's going to be this sobering up of like, okay, how do we take that fantasy and actually ground it in the material world? How do we actually ground it in with plans, with commitment, with like, what are we here to build, and a sense of longevity and a sense of purpose. So up until then, though, we're in this, like, we're in a little bit of la la land. Like everything's a bit like, whoa, anything's possible. We have this like Alice in Wonderland kind of vibe. And again, like not trying to know where it's all going, not trying to have all of the answers right now. Last thing I want to mention about March is that we're going into eclipse season. On top of all of that, we're having eclipses. So it's like there's big change in the fields. Hi, Rio. Rio's like, yes, she wants to be part of the call. There's big change in the field, and with eclipses, as we know, like we'll talk more about that coming up in March. We've got a big eclipse happening in Virgo on March 13th. So we'll have our next Coven call for that, but stay tuned for more about eclipses. But we've got eclipses going on as we're in this portal of like what's going on in March. So I just wanted to kind of prepare everyone for that. I wanted to talk about the Venus retrograde because, again, we're already in pre-shadow for that. We need to already be sort of paying attention and understanding what our lessons are around this retrograde, what they're going to be. And again, if you want to know how this is going to impact you individually, looking at your charts between 24 degrees Pisces and 10 degrees of Aries, that's going to be the part of the chart that's going to be hit by both retrogrades. And then seeing what house you've got Pisces in, what house you've got Aries in. Those are the two houses that are going to invite some kind of big change in perspective and some big shifts. So I think that's where I'll leave it off for the chart and for the full moon reading. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. And if you're watching us on the recording, and I hope you enjoyed the forecast.